Welcome to the Whiskey Vault. I'm Daniel Whittington, Chancellor of Wizard Academy and Whiskey Marketing School. This is a day where we talk about heads and tails and what do you do with them. This was from a question from Brian Hebben. Oh, that was a good quirk sound. So I've been watching On the Barrel and the YouTube channel, and they're like all about the cork sound. And now I have become hyper aware of when I'm shooting, and I'm like, oh, you're right, that is a good cork sound, or oh, that was a little disappointing. Anyway, so Brian Hebben said, what do distilleries do with the heads and tails? Now, for a refresher, heads and tails assume that you're working on a pot still and that you're making cuts to the product that comes off of the still during a spirit run when you plan on keeping the hearts cut to put into a barrel. There's a whole video about this. You can go back and watch how to run a pot still. The heads are the very first things that come off the still, and they include some kind of dangerous chemicals and also some flavors and things that you don't want in your heart cut. So you run those off, and then you make a cut, and then you start keeping it. This is stuff that's going to go into a barrel. It's called the heart. This is a simplification of it, and then you start to get lower and lower and lower because you have the temperature rising and boiling points changing the chemical structure of what's coming off, and the alcohol level gets lower and lower, and then you start to get close to what they consider to be the tails, and then you make a cut, and that middle section of the heart goes into barrels, and now you're in the tails, the stuff that you don't want, but there's still some alcohol in there that if you just stop right now, you're gonna waste. Because pot distillation is not clean, it's muddy. It's like you ever look at a rainbow, and if you just sort of glance in that direction, you can see that there's four colors. But if you look really close, it's almost impossible to tell where one color turns to another color in a line. Right? That's the prism gradient effect. And so the same thing happens in distillation on a pot still. Chemicals show up at different boiling points, but not in a clean straight line. They show up over a gradient, and there's an ethanol in the whole run, and there's some chemicals that bleed across this whole section. And so you end up with heads and tails, this stuff that isn't what you wanted in the heart, but there's still some good stuff in there that you don't want to lose. So a lot of distilleries will just put that back into the next run. So if you're a big distillery, you will actually have valves and pipes that automatically take heads and tails and cycle them into holding tanks back into secondary runs. And so you'll put it into your next run. And you'll just keep doing that until you get super spent tails that have been run through a bunch, and then you sort of discard, right? But, and small craft guys will do the same thing. They'll take heads and tails, put them in a tank, proof them down, add them in a percentage to the next run. We did that at Crowded Barrel. It's usually around 20% or so would be like the new low wines mixed with heads and tails from a previous one, and then we would run it again. But there are two other things you can do with heads and tails that are actually kind of interesting we're going to talk about right after we drink Maker's Mark 101. Not Wild Turkey, Maker's Mark 101. It was a special release, but if you look at the original release of the 101, it was like this fancy glass bottle with nice ornate. And now on the shelf, it's the classic Maker's Mark label with the 101. So maybe they're making it a thing now. I think it's kind of funny that Wild Turkey was the 101 for so long, and Maker's Mark is like, you know what? We can do 101. Watch this. Hold my beer. There's a lot of advertising from makers that's like, this is our preferred. This one Bill Samuels really loved, or Bill Samuels Jr., right? Really loved. It was his favorite, and that's why we started bottling it. And sure, whatever. I mean, you've got cask strength Maker's Mark. Is there a difference between the 101 and the cask strength? I would bet everything I have, absolutely. Because I would think that you chose the cask strength for a specific flavor profile, and you chose the 101 for barrels for what would be perfect at 101. So I'm betting you can't just buy the cask strength, proof it down to 101, and get the same whiskey. I don't know that because I didn't bring the cask strength, but I'm betting this is a unique blended from their warehouse specifically to go into the 101. So what do we get? Ooh, man, there you go. That is dense, almost chocolate cherry. Remember, this is wheated, right? So 26%, I think, red winter wheat. 14 barley, 60 corn, if I remember correctly. That is dense. It's a little grassy. It's soft and creamy, but it's got a chocolate cherry note, and it's got almost like it's set on top of vanilla ice cream, and then a dark, oaky, tanniny thread through it, almost like you would drizzle on top of a sundae. I love the nose. I like Maker's Mark. I think it's just a solid bourbon. So I anticipate liking this one too. Woo-wee, that cherry is strong in the palate. That is cherry chocolate, dry oak, and then shoop, it just sort of goes away. Huh. Not a lot of a finish on that one. Let me try it again. Okay. Dark caramel, chocolate covered cherry, slight wood tannin, and then the finish stops at the back of your jaw and everything just lives on your tongue and in your palate. I think I just spit. Everything lives on your tongue and your palate, but nothing sort of goes down into the long finish. It's all living jaw forward in the palate. Huh. I'm going to add a little water to this 101. It's a good whiskey, though. But of course it is. It's Maker's Mark, and they make great whiskey. So that's not really surprising or interesting. Oh, man, it's a weird thing to say. This whiskey's really good, but that's not interesting. Okay. Okay, I need to let that sit because that just watered it down into bleh. That's probably because I drank it too fast and I just had a sip of water. So, let's go back. What two things can you do with heads and tails, heads and tails that are not just cycling it back into a run until you bleed it dry? One is the one that we did at Crowded Barrel, and that I've known a lot of craft guys to do it. I don't know many big producers that do it, and it's called a Queen's Run. And that's not a legal name, or it's just like an industry term that it is often referred to. There are other names for it too. But it's when you take those heads and tails, dump them together, proof them down, and do a third distillation on it on your pot still of only heads and tails collections. And then you make a heart cut on that. And what you get is this like meteor, simultaneously lighter because it's triple distillation, but also funkier distillation because you're working only with heads and tails. And what that will happen with that is you put it into a barrel all by itself and you age it, and it either becomes later a blending component you can use for your releases that provides a slightly distinct character, or if you really want to get nerdy, you can release a Queen's Cut barrel, single barrel. And it's really interesting. The second thing that you can do, and this is the weirdest one, industry insider, not really for consumer, is you can take the heads, because the tails don't normally have enough alcohol to do this. You can take the heads and bottle it in a spray bottle, which we would do all the time. And everybody I know does this. Not all, because that's just too many heads, but you always have 2 or 3 bottles of heads around that are like really high proof, right? We're talking 80, 90% alcohol. And you use them as sanitizer. Not on your hands, because it still smells like a grain spirit. It's not true vodka. But you'll spray it on valves and connections and hoses and pipes to sanitize things when you're moving beer and brew, or when you're moving things you don't want to carry stuff with it. You'll spray down connectors and things like that. And it's just a nice, easy, quick sanitizer to have around without having to spend a bunch of money on sanitizer or add a chemically taste to some of your other products. You know, you're just using a grain product that you distilled. So there is, however, a lesson that many craft distilleries learned the hard way, which is during COVID, We ran out of hand sanitizer so fast that the feds said, hey, distillers, if you guys want to produce hand sanitizer, we'll take it. Well, FDA grade sanitizer has very specific chemical requirements and neutral requirements. None of these distilleries were meeting those requirements. And that's why for about a 4-year period, we all pressed a pump of sanitizer and then smelled it and went, whoa, that is funky. That is melon, or that is like, whoa, what is going on? That's because what you were basically doing was, that's heads cuts, right? And for the longest time, you would walk around and I would, a bathroom or a place in public, and I would go pump and I would pick it up and go, son of a, this is heads cuts from some random local distillery, and it just smells like funky grain heads cuts. And then you just rubbed the heads cuts all over your hands. Did it sanitize? Yeah. Did it make your hands smell funky? Yeah. True FDA grade sanitizer is more neutral and actually has a different layer of chemicals to it, which is why at the end of COVID, and the feds were like, all right, here's the thing. All of you, if your hand sanitizer you are putting out doesn't meet these chemical requirements, then you got to shut that shit down. And it overnight, boom, gone. Very few of the craft distilleries who were putting out hand sanitizer actually created something that met the federal requirement guidelines for sanitizer. But it's used often in the distillery where it's not for public consumption and no one cares. With a little water. Ooh, that brought the chocolate forward and the oak tannins forward just a little bit. I like it better with a little water on the nose. A little more oak forward. The palate's simple. The nose is better. The palate goes a little wrong. I liked it better at cask strength. Your mileage may vary, but I'm really glad you're here. Cheers. Your mileage may vary on many things, but not on liking and subscribing to the Whiskey Vault channel.